Can you hear them? Can you hear the whispers of the ancestors? We remember. Their stories are in these walls, in other walls, in all the spaces we are, in our bones, in the air that we breathe, in the eyes and faces of our children, of our relatives, our descendants. Their stories are in the touch of a calloused hand, or a hand that is soft from lotion, from many, many nights of lotion, in the melody of songs that we hum while washing dishes or riding a tractor or weeding in the garden, in remembered faces. We hear the whispers of the ancestors, how their stories touch our lives and call us into becoming. And we are becoming. And our descendants, the people after us, will hear our stories. Our theme this month is the gift of heritage. And today marks the start of two events in the cultural calendar. It's the start of LGBTQ History Month and also Banned Books Week. And so I thought, what can we make of those things tied together? Well, how do they relate? What might we understand about those things together? And the history and heritage of Unitarian Universalists engaged in the movements for LGBTQ rights and intellectual freedom. So that's where I'm going. And I'm giving you a roadmap here. And I also want to talk about a social justice initiative that is happening right here at SCOOF right now, that you're going to hear more about in the coming weeks and months, and something that's happening while I'm gone on sabbatical that we're really excited about. So let me say a few things about what I think about this. The reason that October is LGBTQ History Month is that October 11th is National Coming Out Day. And back in the 70s and 80s, there were two big marches in October that lifted up LGBT rights first, and then T, and then Q, right? And we keep adding initials because it's important to add initials. So let's just say the initials: L, lesbian; G, gay; B, bi; T, trans; Q, queer. Queer used to be a pejorative term, and the movement has reclaimed it and said that is our word as a political organizing word. LGBTQI, intersex; A, asexual or ally; plus, that leaves a whole string of other letters. So I will often say LGBTQIA plus. That's not hard. You just learn to say it, LGBTQIA plus. My pronouns are she and her. It's not that hard. I think they is the best pronoun of all. It's so easy. I don't know who Charlie offices with. I could say, Charlie, how's your office partner? What did they wear yesterday? It doesn't matter whether it's I don't have to know. How's my mail carrier? What did they bring me today? Right? You just don't have to know. God, they is the best possible pronoun for God, if you should need such a thing. Right? Here is an interesting piece of history. I think this is a really interesting piece of history. As I was looking at the history of Unitarian Universalist involvement in support of LGBTQ and IA issues, right? The first known, the first time that we actually touched on this issue was in 1967. In 1967, there was a UU committee on goals that conducted a study on the beliefs in our association, right? A lot of different things. What did we believe? And attitudes about homosexuality within the association. This is interesting. Over 1967, over 80% of our association believed that it should be discouraged. We never had a ruling that it was sinful, we didn't do that, or that gay clergy couldn't be ordained. We didn't do that because no gay clergy at that point were out, right? No one had challenged that in any way. It wasn't until 1969 that a man named James Stoll publicly declared himself to be a homosexual at a student religious group. All right. So he's the first out Unitarian Universalist in 1969. Of course, there were gay UUs before that. There had to be, of course. Right. All right. That was in 67, 80%. Right. But in 1970, just 3 years later, the General Assembly of the UUA passed a resolution to end discrimination against homosexuals and bisexuals. And it called on congregations to develop sex education programs to promote healthy attitudes toward diverse forms of sexuality. So here is this pretty big majority of folks who believe that homosexuality should be discouraged, but the association and the leaders of the association saying, you know what? That's not healthy. That's not safe. We are going to call for an end to discrimination, and going against actually the kind of rank and file and leading forward and saying, we think that this is important and we need a healthy dialogue on sexuality. They developed an Office of Gay Affairs. They developed several other things. In 1979, the first openly gay man was called to serve a UU congregation. And there's quite a bit of history going on here. Eventually, we developed the About Your Sexuality curriculum. That happens in 1971. We publish a sexuality education curriculum about your sexuality to teach positive attitudes about sexuality, both heterosexuality and homosexuality, right? We think sex education is so important, we want to teach it in Sunday school, right? That curriculum has become the OWL curriculum, Our Whole Lives, and it is considered the best sexuality education in the country that is taught in many Unitarian Universalist congregations. Would that we had a cohort large enough to be able to teach it here. That would be important. We had a flap with the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts of America informed the UUA that it would in 1997, it would no longer allow Unitarian Universalists to earn the Religion in Life Merit Badge because of the UU's stance on homosexuals, right? So our president got involved in it and wrote a letter, and we created our own pathway to scouting, a scouting badge. And there are a number of Unitarian Universalists who have achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, hold that proud heritage, but we've created a workaround without having to kowtow to what we would say is prejudice within the Boy Scouts of America, discriminatory practices. In 2002, the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison was called to serve as the first openly transgender minister. And we think that's the first openly transgender minister in the country who was called to do so. So as other denominations have lawsuits and legal actions and denominational splits and things like that, my heart goes out to denominations that have to navigate those legal splits. The Unitarian Universalist Association, though not perfect, has done pretty well on this issue. By now, almost 70% of congregations have gone through the process called welcoming congregations. It is a robust, pretty intense curriculum that congregations go through to say, we've talked about it and we are welcoming to LGBTQIA plus folks. Not just that people are welcome here, but that diversity is integrated and celebrated in all the ways. It's not tolerance, it is integration and pride, right? And it takes a lot of effort. It's about an 18-month-long process, and it takes a pretty heavy lift for a congregation to do that. I think it would be wonderful for Scoof to do it, and it's a heavy lift. So that would have to be decided as a priority. In this, as you blue dots in a red area, I think of you as the blue dots in the red area. It's important work here to stand for inclusion, not just inclusion, but integration and pride and that lift, and to say who we are out loud and proud. As you well know, I'm not telling you folks who live in this region anything that you don't know. It's grim. It is grim. The anti-gay rhetoric, the violence that is being done, the bullying that's done in schools, both by peers and especially by adults. And as I started thinking about it and I started reading about it, realized that the so-called parental rights movement is really this movement that's driving anti-LGBTQ plus action in schools and is also driving book banning in schools and in public libraries, because most of the books that are being banned, again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, have LGBTQIA content. And so they're being banned because, we can't have our children read something that we don't agree with, right? Your child is not allowed to read something that I don't agree with. That's the loop there. That doesn't seem fair, does it? That doesn't seem fair. If I don't agree with something, I shouldn't be able to tell you that your child can or cannot read it. It seems to me that parental rights should say you get to decide. I mean, that's a false flag if I've ever heard one, right? So the way those two are tied is pretty fascinating to me. And this action around school boards, around reaching out to go far back into someone's history to say you can't work at this school because we disagree with something you may have done far back in your past. That's happening right now. I mean, we've got that story right here in this room, and it's anti-democratic, and it is this so-called parental rights movement. One of the groups that's I've learned that is really on the leading edge of this, and the book banning group is active in your neck of the woods, the Moms for Liberty, that looks as if it's a grassroots organization, but is in fact what's called an AstroTurf organization. Do you all know AstroTurf? Looks like it's grassroots, but it's actually funded by dark money, by big organizations that are kind of hard to find. My understanding is that Moms for Liberty is listed as a partner organization with the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a right-wing juggernaut. And so they have a lot of funding from that. They look very grassroots, but this effort is well organized. And so it's all one more wrench of authoritarianism to throw into the works to divide us, right? I'm not sure people care that much, but it's one more way to divide us, to get into to say there's one way to be human. There's one way to be a girl or a boy or a man or a woman. There's one way to be this way. There's one way to think. And we are going to tell you what it is. That's the danger. We are going to tell you what it is. The Unitarian Universalist Association has stood firm for intellectual freedom. And while I don't want to give this is not an exact one-to-one to banned books. I think it's an important illustrative example about the Pentagon Papers. In 1967, then Defense Secretary Robert McNamara had assembled a team to draft the full history on decision-making on Vietnam from the early 40s to March of 1968, right? This group was going to really figure out what it was. 36 men, most of whom remain to this day anonymous, worked on this study task force. One known member was Daniel Ellsberg. He was disgusted by the disparity between the internal policy making he saw and the lies that were being fed to the public. He began smuggling the documents out of the meetings into his safe from the Rand Corporation. He leaked the documents first to the New York Times, and there was a lawsuit to say that the Times had to stop publishing him. It was known as the day that the presses stopped. They were enjoined, as was the Washington Post. It went to the newspapers went to the Supreme Court and won, and established this legal precedent against imposing prior restraint. So here's the thing. Here's how it ties to Unitarian Universalism. First, Ellsberg asked a Washington Post journalist to deliver a copy of the papers to Senator Mike Gravel, who was a Universalist. He wanted Gravel to read these on the Senate floor and get them into the congressional record. Well, he couldn't filibuster with them for reasons I don't quite understand, but he read from the Pentagon Papers in a late night meeting of a subcommittee that Gravel was a member of. And that's how he got these on the congressional record, right? Immediate disclosure of these contents of the papers will change public policy that supports the war. That's what Gravel and Ellsberg thought. And they wanted to make the papers as widely available as possible, right? So they sought a publisher who would create a book out of this, right? And so they went to Simon & Schuster, and they went to big ones, big publishers, big publishing houses who might do this, Knopf and other ones. And nobody would take it because it was political suicide and economic dynamite, right? That was very scary for any big publishing house to do it. Mike Gravel, who is a Unitarian Universalist, goes to Beacon Press, the publishing house of the Unitarian Universalist Association, tiny little Beacon Press, and says, this is important. We need to get this out into the world. And Beacon Press says, okay, we'll do it. Blue dot in a sea of red. They said, yes, we'll do it. We will publish the Pentagon Papers. They were targeted by the FBI. The entire Unitarian Universalist Association had their entire financial history targeted by the FBI. There were death threats. It was a pretty big mess. But they said, this is important. And many people think that the publication of the Pentagon Papers was part of the turning point, turned the tide in helping to end the war in Vietnam.
We did.
We did.
We did.
Yeah. There was a lot of.
And the Pentagon Papers, we get it before the Pentagon Papers.
Absolutely, Keith. Absolutely. Right. Lots of people working on lots of different levels. It always takes lots of people working on lots of different levels, using the influence that they can use, using our institutional strength, our personal strength, our ability to step up even when we're scared, our ability to say, yes, you know what? I don't have time to do that. And I'm going to show up to that school board meeting. Yes, I don't have time to do that, but I'm going to write that letter. Yes, okay, I'll do it. What would it be like if there were some moments that we could show up together and have our voices heard? Maybe stop something, maybe, but show up together and have our voices be heard. If there were a school board meeting where somebody were trying to ram something through, or there were a city council meeting or a library board meeting, I don't know, some event where something were trying to happen and someone were trying to ram something through, and there were a rapid response network of blue dots in a red sea who could say, not on my watch, I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up. I'll write a letter. I'll get on the phone. That congressman does not care what I have to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to say it anyway. Every single time, I'm going to show up. They're going to get so tired. They're going to get tired of seeing me, but I'm going to show up. I like to believe that there has always been a resistance. By definition, there has always been a resistance. There would have been no need for the Spanish Inquisition if everybody had just said, okay. There would have been no need for the genocide on this soil if the indigenous people had just said, okay. Resistance doesn't always win, but there has always been a resistance. And it is important to know that we stand in the stream. As a matter of fact, we don't stand. We move. And we move with history at our back. So listen for news of this rapid response network. We have a team that is coalescing, and a leader, the Reverend Dr. Andrea Johnson, is working with SCOOF members, Dan Adair, Ann Turner, Jean Adair, Gary, Noreen. There may be others who are working with this in my absence to kind of create a charter and see what we can do. And so watch for more news, because we don't stand, we move with history and heritage at our back. May it be so.